Have you ever looked into someone's eyes, the person who promised to love you forever, and suddenly realized they wanted everyone else to fear you? Not hate you. Not leave you. Fear you. Because once people believe you're crazy, they stop listening to anything you say. That's exactly what happened to me. My own husband spent 3 years convincing everyone that I was losing my mind. My family believed him. Our friends believed him. Even my doctor almost believed him. He smiled while telling people how worried he was about me. He held my hand in public, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I'm doing everything I can to help my wife." Everyone thought he was a devoted husband. No one knew he was the reason my life was falling apart. And by the time the truth finally came out, he was the one begging people to believe him. My name is Hannah Brooks. 3 years ago, if someone had told me my husband would destroy my reputation just to protect his own secrets, I would have laughed. Because Michael wasn't just my husband. He was my best friend. We met when I was 28. I worked as an interior designer, and Michael had recently opened his own accounting firm. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of man who bought expensive gifts or made grand romantic speeches. He was steady, reliable, the kind of person who remembered how you liked your coffee and always carried an umbrella if rain was expected. That's what made me fall in love with him. He made life feel safe. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony, surrounded by family and close friends. Looking back at those wedding photos hurts. Not because I miss him, but because I miss the woman smiling in those pictures. She had no idea what was coming. The first year of our marriage was wonderful. We bought a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. Every Sunday morning we'd make pancakes together. We adopted a golden retriever named Charlie. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt real. When my mother passed away unexpectedly, Michael became my biggest support. He held me while I cried. He handled funeral arrangements. He made sure I ate even when I didn't want to. Everyone kept saying how lucky I was. "You married one of the good ones," my sister Emily told me. I believed her. I really did. Everything changed about 18 months after the wedding. It started with little things. I would put my car keys on the kitchen counter. The next morning, they'd be inside the bathroom cabinet. I'd laugh and assume I'd forgotten where I'd left them. Then my phone charger disappeared. A week later, I found it inside the linen closet. After that, I started forgetting appointments. At least, I thought I was forgetting them. One afternoon, my best friend Lisa called me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "We were supposed to have lunch an hour ago." I frowned. "No, we planned that for tomorrow." There was silence. "Hannah, I have the text messages." She sent me screenshots. There it was. A conversation from my phone confirming today's lunch. I stared at the screen. I had absolutely no memory of sending those messages. I apologized over and over. Lisa laughed it off. It happens. But it didn't stop happening. Over the next few weeks, I missed birthdays. Forgot meetings. Showed up to appointments on the wrong day. Sometimes I'd wake up convinced I'd already done something, only to discover I hadn't. I started wondering if stress was affecting my memory. Michael seemed concerned. "Maybe you should slow down at work," he'd say gently. "You've been through a lot since your mom died." It sounded reasonable. So I agreed. Then came the sleepless nights. Almost every night around 3 in the morning, I'd wake up feeling confused. The bedroom door would be open. Lights downstairs would be on. Sometimes kitchen drawers were pulled out. One morning, I found flowers scattered across the counter. Another morning, every picture frame in the living room had been turned backward. "Okay'd exhausted too." "You were sleepwalking again," he said. I was. "You don't remember?" I shook my head. He sighed heavily. "Hannah, you tried making coffee at 3 this morning." My stomach tightened. "I don't remember that." "I know." He wrapped his arms around me. "It's okay. We'll figure this out." His voice was full of concern. His face looked worried. Everything about him screamed loving husband. So why did I still feel uneasy? A few days later, Michael suggested seeing a doctor. "I think we should rule out anything medical." I agreed immediately. The doctor ran blood tests. Everything looked normal. He asked about stress, grief, sleep habits. When I described the strange memory lapses, he recommended keeping a journal. So I did. Every morning, every evening, I wrote everything down. Where I placed my keys, what I ate, who I talked to. At first it helped, until my journal started changing. One evening I wrote 3 pages before going to bed. The next morning, half the pages were missing. Not torn out. Gone. Entire entries had disappeared. I stared at the notebook in disbelief. Maybe I hadn't written them after all. Maybe I only thought I had. I started questioning everything. Michael became even more attentive. Too attentive. He insisted on driving me everywhere. He reminded me to take vitamins. He called me several times a day asking where I was. If I forgot something, he'd smile sadly. It's happening again. Those words haunted me. It's happening again. Soon our friends noticed. At dinner one night, Michael laughed softly after I accidentally called someone by the wrong name. Hannah's memory hasn't been the best lately. Everyone chuckled politely. I forced a smile. Then he added, "We're getting her checked out." I'm a little worried. The room suddenly became quiet. People looked at me differently. Not with judgment. With pity. I hated that look. Over the following months, those conversations happened everywhere. Birthday parties, family dinners, neighborhood barbecues. Michael always sounded concerned. Never cruel. Never insulting. He'd simply say things like, "Hannah gets confused sometimes. She's been forgetting conversations. I'm just trying to support her." No one questioned him. Why would they? He looked like the perfect husband caring for his struggling wife. Even I began believing something was wrong with me. One afternoon, I visited my sister Emily. While we drank coffee, she hesitated before speaking. "Hannah." "Yeah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." She looked uncomfortable. "Have you been taking your medication?" I froze. "What medication?" "The medication Michael said your doctor prescribed." I stared at her. "I've never been prescribed medication." Emily's face turned pale. "What?" I slowly shook my head. She looked completely confused. "But Michael told all of us." Her sentence faded away. For the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the story Michael had been telling everyone. And for the first time in months, I stopped wondering whether I was losing my mind. Instead, I started wondering if someone wanted me to think I was. I drove home from Emily's house with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Her words kept echoing in my head. "Michael told all of us your doctor prescribed medication." Medication? There was no medication. No diagnosis. No prescription. The doctor had only suggested I reduce stress and improve my sleep. So why would Michael tell everyone something that wasn't true? For the first time in months, I stopped blaming myself. Instead, I asked a question that terrified me. What if I wasn't the problem? That evening, Michael came home carrying my favorite takeout. He smiled as though nothing had happened. "Long day?" he asked. "A little." He kissed my forehead and disappeared into the kitchen. I watched him from the hallway. Everything about him looked normal. Calm. Relaxed. Comfortable. How could the same man who tucked a blanket around me when I fell asleep on the couch also be telling people I was mentally unstable? It didn't make sense. Unless he had a reason. Over dinner, I decided to test him. I ran into Dr. Miller's receptionist today. Michael looked up. "Oh." She asked how my medication was working. For a split second, his fork stopped moving. It was barely noticeable, but I saw it. Then he smiled. "That's good. It means they're following up." I stared at him. "What medication?" His eyes met mine. "The one you're taking." "I'm not taking any medication." His smile disappeared. "Hannah, I'm serious." He sighed heavily. "You forgot again." There it was. That sentence. "You forgot again." A chill ran down my spine. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look confused. He simply turned my own memory against me. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I quietly slipped out of bed. Michael was asleep. Or at least he looked asleep. I walked downstairs and opened the kitchen drawer where we kept important papers. Insurance documents, tax returns, medical records. Everything seemed normal, until I found a small envelope with my name on it. Inside was a receipt from a pharmacy. It showed my name, my date of birth, and a prescription for anti-anxiety medication. I stared at it in disbelief. I'd never seen that prescription before. I'd never picked it up. Yet according to the receipt, someone had. The next morning, while Michael was in the shower, I called the pharmacy. "Hi," I said nervously. "I'm calling about a prescription under Hannah Brooks." The pharmacist confirmed it. "Yes, ma'am. It was collected about 6 weeks ago." I never picked it up. There was silence. "According to our records, your husband collected it for you." My heart nearly stopped. My husband? Yes. He showed identification. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. Michael had picked up medication in my name. Medication I had never taken. Why? I wanted answers. But I knew if I confronted him now, he'd deny everything. So I pretended nothing had happened. For the next week, I watched him carefully. Really watched him. I noticed things I'd ignored before. Every evening, after dinner, he'd disappear into his home office and lock the door. He'd always said he was finishing work. Now I wasn't so sure. He also insisted on doing all our finances. I didn't even know the passwords to our bank accounts anymore. Whenever I asked about money, he'd smile. "I'll handle it." I used to think that was kindness. Now it felt like control. A few days later, Michael left for an overnight business trip. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I walked into his office. Every drawer was locked, except one. Inside, I found folders full of client files. Nothing unusual. Then, tucked underneath them, a small black notebook. It wasn't labeled. I opened it. Every page contained dates, times, short notes. At first, they made no sense. Then I read one entry. April 14th. Hid car keys. She panicked for 20 minutes. I frowned. The next page. April 20th. Changed lunch date in her phone. Lisa noticed. Good. I felt sick. Another page. May 3rd. Turned picture frames around after she fell asleep. She blamed herself again. My vision blurred. I kept reading. Every strange thing that had happened over the past year. Every missing item. Every forgotten appointment. Every confusing moment. It was all there. Written in Michael's handwriting. He hadn't been helping me. He'd been creating the confusion. Deliberately. Methodically. Like some twisted experiment. I dropped the notebook onto the desk. "No," I whispered. "This can't be real." Charlie wandered into the room and rested his head against my leg. I knelt down and hugged him. For months I'd believed I was losing my mind. Instead, the man I trusted most had been slowly dismantling my confidence one lie at a time. Before leaving the office, I took pictures of every page with my phone. Then I put the notebook exactly where I'd found it. I didn't know what Michael was planning, but now I knew one thing. He wasn't just lying. He was documenting it. The following afternoon, I met Lisa for coffee. I almost didn't tell her. Part of me worried she'd think I'd actually lost it. Instead, I handed her my phone. She read the photographs silently. By the 3rd page, tears filled her eyes. "Oh my God." She looked at me. "Hannah." "I know." She grabbed my hand across the table. "You're not crazy." Hearing someone say those words, after months of doubting myself, broke something inside me. I cried so hard people turned to look. Lisa didn't care. She simply held my hand until I could breathe again. "We need to go to the police," she said. "I don't think this is enough. It proves he's manipulating you." But why? That was the question neither of us could answer. Why would a husband spend months convincing everyone his wife was mentally unstable? There had to be something bigger. Something he was hiding. That evening, I returned home before Michael. As I walked into the living room, something caught my eye. A tiny blinking light. It was hidden inside the smoke detector. I frowned. Standing on a chair, I looked closer. It wasn't a smoke detector. Or rather, it wasn't only a smoke detector. Tucked inside was a tiny camera, pointing directly into the living room. My stomach dropped. I searched the house. Another one inside the hallway clock. One behind a bookshelf. One inside the bedroom. Someone had been recording me. Every day. Every night. Every emotional breakdown. Every confused moment Michael had carefully created. I suddenly understood why he always seemed to know exactly what I'd done. He wasn't guessing. He was watching. And as I stood frozen in the middle of my own home, I heard the sound of Michael's car pulling into the driveway. I barely had time to put everything back before the front door opened. He smiled the same warm smile he'd worn for years. "Hey, sweetheart." For the first time. That smile didn't comfort me. It terrified me. The sound of Michael's footsteps echoed through the hallway. I quickly stepped down from the chair, forcing myself to breathe normally. Charlie wagged his tail and ran to greet him. Michael bent down to pet him before looking at me. "There you are," he said with an easy smile. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just cleaning." He glanced toward the smoke detector for the briefest moment. It lasted less than a second. But I noticed. He was checking the camera. That tiny movement confirmed everything. The cameras weren't there for security. They were there for me. That night I lay awake beside him, pretending to sleep. His breathing became slow and steady. Around 1:30 in the morning, he quietly got out of bed. I kept my eyes closed. He slipped into his office and shut the door. 5 minutes later, I heard the soft click of his laptop opening. When the house became silent again, I waited another 20 minutes before sneaking downstairs. His office door was unlocked. Inside, his laptop was still on. The screen had gone dark. I touched the keyboard. A password box appeared. Of course. I tried Charlie's name. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. Then I typed the only thing Michael had seemed obsessed with over the past year. Hannah. The computer unlocked. My stomach twisted. His desktop contained dozens of folders. Taxes. Clients. Insurance. Nothing unusual. Then I noticed one folder named Medical. Inside were scanned documents with my name on them. Doctor's reports. Psychological evaluations. Prescription histories. At first glance, they looked official. Until I noticed something strange. One doctor's signature appeared on 3 different reports. Each signature looked slightly different. I zoomed in. They had been copied and pasted. The documents were fake. Every single one. Michael had created medical records claiming I suffered from memory disorders and severe emotional instability. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then another folder caught my attention. Property transfer. I opened it. There were scanned copies of my late father's will. Bank statements. Legal forms. One document made my blood run cold. It was a power of attorney. With my name. And my signature. Except, it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it. According to the document, I had voluntarily given Michael complete authority over my financial decisions nearly 6 months earlier. I had never signed anything like that. Never. Before I could read further, headlights flashed through the office window. Michael. He'd forgotten his wallet. Panic shot through me. I quickly photographed every document I could, closed the folders, locked the laptop, and slipped out of the office just as I heard the garage door opening. "Hannah? I'm in the kitchen," I called. He walked in smiling. "I forgot my wallet." I smiled back. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The next morning, while Michael left for work, I drove straight to my father's lawyer. His name was Richard Collins. He'd handled my parents' estate years earlier. When I showed him the photographs of the forged documents, his expression changed instantly. "Where did you get these?" "From my husband's computer." He looked stunned. "Hannah, these aren't legitimate." "I know." He adjusted his glasses and studied the papers again. "If someone filed these with the court." He stopped speaking. "What?" "They could legally gain control over your inheritance." My mouth went dry. "My inheritance?" Richard slowly nodded. "You inherited nearly $2 million after your father's investments matured." I stared at him. What? He looked confused. You didn't know? I shook my head. I thought Dad only left me the house. Richard leaned back in his chair. No. He left you investment accounts that couldn't be accessed until your 35th birthday. I felt dizzy. I turned 35 next month. Richard's face slowly filled with concern. Hannah, I think your husband already knows. Everything suddenly made sense. The lies, the fake diagnosis, the cameras, the manipulation. If everyone believed I was mentally unstable, Michael could argue I wasn't capable of handling my finances. With forged documents and fake medical records, he could gain control over everything my father had left me. It had never been about my mental health. It had been about money. Richard immediately contacted a forensic document examiner. Within 48 hours, the expert confirmed what we already suspected. Every signature had been forged. Every medical report had been fabricated. Richard looked me straight in the eyes. You need a lawyer. And the police. Before doing anything, I wanted one more answer. There was still something bothering me. Michael couldn't have done all of this alone. Someone had helped him. Fake medical records. Legal paperwork. Forgery. This was bigger than one person. That evening, I quietly followed Michael after work. Instead of coming home, he drove across town to an expensive restaurant. I parked across the street. 10 minutes later, a woman walked inside. Tall, blonde, perfectly dressed. Michael stood up and hugged her. Not like coworkers. Not like friends. Like lovers. I felt sick. I took several pictures through the window. Then I watched as she handed him a thick manila envelope. He opened it. Both of them smiled. Michael reached across the table and kissed her hand. I couldn't breathe. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was building a new life with someone else. Using my father's money. I returned home before he did. When Michael walked through the front door, he looked happier than I'd seen him in months. Good day, I asked. The best. I made your favorite pasta. He smiled. I don't know what I did to deserve you. I nearly laughed. Instead, I served dinner. We talked about ordinary things. The weather. Charlie's next vet appointment. A neighbor planting new flowers. It felt surreal. I was sitting across from the man who had spent nearly a year trying to convince the world I was insane. And he had no idea I knew everything. Later that night, after Michael fell asleep, my phone buzzed. It was Richard. Call me immediately. I stepped into the hallway. Richard? Hannah, someone accessed your inheritance file this afternoon. What? The request came from an attorney representing Michael. My heart stopped. He filed emergency paperwork claiming you're mentally incompetent. When? This afternoon. Tomorrow morning, a judge could temporarily freeze your assets until a medical evaluation is completed. My knees nearly gave out. Michael wasn't waiting for my birthday. He was making his move now. Richard's voice became urgent. We have until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to stop him. I looked toward the bedroom where Michael slept peacefully. He believed he had already won. He had no idea. Tomorrow, everything was about to change. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael sitting across from that woman in the restaurant, smiling as though my entire life already belonged to him. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I quietly got out of bed. Michael was still asleep. For a moment, I stood there looking at him. It was strange. Just a few weeks earlier, I would have looked at him with love. Now, all I felt was disbelief. How could someone spend years pretending to protect the person they were secretly destroying? I picked up my bag, whispered goodbye to Charlie, and walked out the front door. By 7:30, I was sitting in Richard Collins' office. Stacks of papers covered the conference table. The fake medical reports. The forged power of attorney. Photos of Michael meeting the blonde woman. Pictures of the notebook where he documented every lie. Richard looked exhausted. So does he know? I asked. He shook his head. No. Good. He slid another folder toward me. We found something else. Inside was a report from a forensic computer specialist. Richard had hired him overnight to examine the copies I'd made from Michael's laptop. He recovered deleted files. I opened the folder. There were emails. Dozens of them. Between Michael and someone named Dr. Alan Pierce. One email made my stomach turn. The fake evaluations need to look convincing. Once the court believes she's mentally unstable, the inheritance transfer will be simple. Another read. Don't worry. She's already questioning her own memory. I couldn't speak. Richard sighed. Dr. Pierce isn't actually your doctor. Who is he? A psychologist whose medical license was suspended 2 years ago. So Michael hired him? It appears that way. At 8:45, we arrived at the courthouse. The hearing wasn't a criminal trial. It was simply to decide whether the judge should grant Michael temporary control over my financial affairs. If we lost, he'd gain access to everything. As we entered the courtroom, I noticed familiar faces. My sister Emily. My best friend Lisa. Michael's parents. Even a few neighbors. Michael had convinced everyone to attend because he wanted them to see the judge declare that I was mentally unstable. He wanted an audience. He smiled when he saw me. Not cruelly. Almost sympathetically. Like a man watching someone he believed had already lost. Hannah, he said quietly. You don't have to do this. I looked at him. Do what? Fight. His voice sounded gentle. I'm only trying to protect you. For months, those words would have broken me. Today, they made me angry. I know exactly what you're trying to protect. For the first time, his smile faded. The hearing began. Michael's attorney stood first. He spoke calmly, professionally. He explained that I had experienced severe memory loss, sleepwalking, emotional instability. He presented copies of the fake medical reports, statements from friends saying I'd forgotten appointments, text messages showing confusing conversations, even photographs of me crying during difficult moments, photos taken inside my own house. I realized then, the hidden cameras hadn't only been recording me, they'd been collecting evidence. Evidence Michael planned to use against me. Then Michael took the witness stand. He looked heartbroken. I love my wife, he told the judge. I've done everything I can to help her. His voice cracked at exactly the right moment. I don't want control of her finances forever. He paused dramatically. I just want to keep her safe until she gets better. Several people in the courtroom wiped away tears. His own mother was crying. Emily lowered her head. I knew what they were thinking. Poor Michael. Imagine caring for someone who's slowly losing her mind. He had perfected the role. Then it was our turn. Richard stood. Your Honor, before responding to these allegations, we'd like permission to present new evidence. The judge nodded. Proceed. Richard walked to the center of the courtroom. The petition before this court is based entirely on fraud. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Michael shifted in his chair. Richard held up the forensic report. Every medical evaluation submitted by Mr. Brooks has been confirmed as fabricated. Michael's attorney immediately stood. Objection. Overruled, the judge replied. Richard continued. We also have evidence that the signatures on the power of attorney were forged. The courtroom became completely silent. Michael's face lost its color. Then Richard placed the black notebook on the evidence table. I'd like the court to examine Exhibit 12. The judge opened it. His eyebrows slowly rose. Richard read aloud. April 14th, hid car keys. She panicked. He turned another page. May 3rd, turned picture frames around after she fell asleep. Another page. Changed appointment in her phone. She blamed herself again. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Emily covered her mouth. Lisa began crying. Michael stared straight ahead. He didn't move. He didn't blink. Richard wasn't finished. He handed the judge printed copies of the emails recovered from Michael's laptop. This correspondence shows that Mr. Brooks knowingly conspired with an unlicensed psychologist to create false medical records. The judge adjusted his glasses and silently read the pages. His expression hardened. Michael's attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Michael shook his head. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked scared. Real fear. not the fake concern he'd shown everyone else. Richard called the forensic document examiner to testify, then the computer specialist, then the pharmacist who confirmed Michael had collected medication in my name. Each witness added another piece, another lie, another crack in the perfect image Michael had built. By the time the final witness stepped down, the man everyone believed was a devoted husband looked like a stranger. The judge turned toward Michael. "Mr. Brooks, would you like to explain any of this?" Michael slowly stood. His lips trembled. "This isn't." He looked around the courtroom. At his parents. At Emily. At me. "This isn't what it looks like." Richard quietly replied. "Then tell us what it is." Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in years. He had no story. No carefully rehearsed explanation. No way to twist reality. Only silence. Then, a voice came from the back of the courtroom. "I think I can explain." Everyone turned. The blonde woman from the restaurant walked inside. She wasn't alone. Behind her were two detectives. Michael's face went completely white. "No," he whispered. She looked directly at the judge. "My name is Rachel Morgan." She took a deep breath. "And I have something this court needs to hear." The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Every eye turned toward the woman standing in the doorway. Rachel Morgan. The same woman I'd seen having dinner with Michael. The same woman he'd kissed across the restaurant table. Michael looked like he'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel didn't answer him. Instead, she walked toward the witness stand with the two detectives following close behind. The judge looked surprised. "And you are?" Rachel took a deep breath. "My name is Rachel Morgan." She glanced at Michael before looking back at the judge. "I worked with Mr. Brooks for almost 2 years." Michael suddenly stood. "Your Honor, this has nothing to do with." "It has everything to do with this case," one of the detectives interrupted. The courtroom fell silent again. Rachel raised her right hand, took the oath, and sat down. Her hands were shaking. "I know this is going to ruin my life," she said quietly. "But I've already spent months helping someone destroy another person's life." She looked directly at me. "I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I simply waited." Then she began speaking. "I met Michael at his accounting firm. At first, he told me his marriage was over. He said Hannah was mentally unstable and that he stayed only because he felt responsible for her." She paused. I believed him. Michael closed his eyes. Rachel continued. "He slowly involved me in his financial work. At first it was small things, organizing files, preparing paperwork. Then one day he asked me to help type medical reports. The room became perfectly still. He said the originals had been damaged and needed to be recreated." Rachel swallowed hard. "I didn't know they were fake." She looked toward the judge. "But after a while, I realized everything was a lie." Richard stood. "What made you realize that?" Rachel reached into her purse. "I found these." She handed several printed emails to the bailiff. The bailiff delivered them to the judge. Rachel continued. "They're conversations between Michael and Dr. Alan Pierce." The judge quietly read the first page. Rachel spoke again. Michael wasn't trying to protect his wife. He was trying to convince the court she was mentally incompetent before she inherited her father's investment accounts. Gasps spread across the courtroom. Michael suddenly jumped to his feet. "She's lying." Rachel turned toward him. "No, Michael. I lied for you. But I'm done." His face turned bright red. "You knew exactly what we were doing." Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes. And that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life." She looked back at the judge. "But Hannah shouldn't have to pay for my mistake." One of the detectives stepped forward. "Your Honor, we've been investigating Mr. Brooks for financial fraud for the past 6 weeks." Michael's attorney looked stunned. "What?" The detective opened a thick file. "Our investigation began after a bank employee reported unusual transfer requests connected to the Brooks inheritance." He placed several documents before the judge. "We've confirmed forged signatures, fabricated legal documents, false medical records, and attempted inheritance fraud totaling nearly $2 million. The courtroom exploded with whispers. Michael's mother burst into tears. His father slowly sat down, staring at his son in complete disbelief. The detective wasn't finished. "There is one more thing." He pressed a button on a small recorder. Michael's voice filled the courtroom. Clear as day. "Once everyone believes she's unstable, nobody will question the paperwork." Another voice asked, "And if she remembers something?" Michael laughed. "She won't. I'll make sure she keeps doubting herself." The recording ended. A heavy silence settled over the room. I felt tears forming in my eyes. Not because I was sad, because for the first time, everyone could hear the truth. Not from me, from him. The judge slowly removed his glasses. He looked directly at Michael. "Mr. Brooks, in over 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen manipulation this calculated." He turned toward me. "Mrs. Brooks, I want to say something before I issue my ruling." He paused. "I cannot imagine what you've endured. You were made to question your own mind by the person you trusted most. I'm deeply sorry." Those simple words nearly broke me. For over a year, I'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to believe me. The judge struck his gavel. The petition declaring Hannah Brooks mentally incompetent is dismissed immediately. The forged documents are referred for criminal prosecution. All financial authority remains solely with Mrs. Brooks. He looked toward the detectives. "Mr. Brooks is to be taken into custody pending formal charges." Before Michael could react, the detectives stepped beside him. One officer placed handcuffs around his wrists. The sound echoed through the courtroom. Michael looked at me. For the first time, there was no confidence, no fake concern. Only fear. "Hannah," he whispered. "I'm sorry." I looked into his eyes. The same eyes I'd once trusted more than my own. Then I quietly answered, "No, you're sorry you got caught." He lowered his head. He didn't argue, because he knew I was right. As the detectives led him away, Michael's mother walked toward me. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. I believed him. She covered her face. I thought you were sick." I gently took her hands. "I know." She looked at me through tears. "Can you ever forgive us?" I smiled sadly. "One day. But today, I need to learn how to forgive myself." 6 months later, the criminal trial ended. Michael pleaded guilty to fraud, forgery, identity theft, and attempted financial theft. Dr. Alan Pierce also faced charges for creating false medical evaluations. Rachel accepted responsibility for her role. Because she cooperated fully with investigators from the beginning, she received probation instead of prison. Before leaving the courthouse after sentencing, she stopped beside me. "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded. "I know. But thank you for finally telling the truth." She quietly walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her. Almost a year has passed since that courtroom hearing. I sold the house Michael and I once shared. There were too many painful memories inside those walls. Using part of my father's inheritance, I opened something my mother had always dreamed about. A community wellness center. Not a hospital. Not a clinic. A place where people recovering from emotional abuse could find counseling, legal advice, and support groups, regardless of whether they could afford them. Every week, I meet women and men who say the same words I once whispered to myself. Maybe I'm the problem. Every time I hear those words, I tell them exactly what someone should have told me much sooner. If someone constantly makes you question your reality, if they tell everyone you're unstable while making every decision for you, if you feel like you're slowly disappearing, trust your instincts. Because love doesn't make you afraid of your own mind. Real love makes you feel safe inside it. Sometimes people ask me if I hate Michael. The answer surprises them. I don't. Hate would mean he's still living inside my heart. He isn't. He's part of my past. A painful chapter. But not my whole story. The truth didn't just expose his lies. It gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. My voice. My confidence. Myself. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Not every bruise is visible. Some people don't break your bones. They break your confidence. They break your trust. They make you doubt your own memories until you no longer recognize yourself. And that's one of the cruelest forms of abuse. But here's what I've also learned. The truth has a strange way of surviving. You can bury it beneath lies, hide it behind fake smiles, cover it with forged documents. But sooner or later, it finds the light. And when it does, no lie is strong enough to stand in its way.